In any kind of ethics or law or morality situation, I believe one of the most asked questions is, when is it acceptable, if ever, to break the law? And I thought, why not start off some of the serious topics with just this question? And that's exactly what we're asking of all our guests today. We're asking some amazing people their opinions on when is it acceptable to break the law. What's up, everybody? My name is Jason, and this is Behind Every Story. If this is your first time with us, let me explain what's happening. I love stories, from comic books to films, songs to jokes, or just listening to someone in a bar or being enveloped in a theater. I love hearing people's stories, and even more so, I love learning about those stories and the stories behind those stories. This show is the proverbial director's commentary on the movie of life. This is episode 6 of the Covid50. This week, we're discussing when is it acceptable to break the law. Now, there's going to be a lot of questions on this show that I might not have answers to, but I did make a promise to all of my guests that I will answer my own questions as well. It was an American president, Thomas Jefferson, who said, "If a law is unjust, a man is not only right to disobey it, he is obligated to do so." But where is that line drawn? And this is the question that I find most intriguing. Sure, the easy answer might be my first go-to answer is if a law does not hinder or impede or cause harm or injustice or any kind of hindrance to any other person, then it must not be that bad to break that law. But I believe there's a scenario for everything. I'm the kind of person who overestimates and over-examines and over-worries about small details. If it's raining outside, I'm thinking of the 8 different places the rain can come in to the house, thus causing more damage to the house and costing me more money in the long run. This is how I also think about breaking the law. Sure, you can speed a little bit faster in that 35-mile-an-hour zone, but what if it takes you that much longer to stop if an animal is crossing the road? You can download that song, and who is it hurting? It's just one song, but in reality, that's someone's livelihood. That's someone's job. You can download a movie and watch that movie and enjoy it and not resell it or anything like that, but you're still taking money away from a situation, but you're still taking potential money away from a career. I believe there's a lot of lines in the sand when it comes to law and breaking said laws. And this is why we have judges and lawyers and courts. Even though I do have my feelings on this, and my feelings lean more toward the concept of if we over-scrutinize things, the more we scrutinize them, the more we detail them out, the less we actually define those in a black or white manner. But do laws have to be black and white? When a murder case is brought to trial, there's a myriad of different words and verbiage to describe what kind of murder it was. Just doing a quick Wikipedia search, you have first-degree murder, which is detailed as any intentional murder that is willful and premeditated with malice aforethought. Second-degree murder, any intentional murder with malice aforethought but is not premeditated or planned in advance. Voluntary manslaughter, sometimes called a crime of passion murder, or an involuntary manslaughter. What about self-defense? What if you are put in harm's way and you have to kill someone to survive or to save a loved one? These are the kind of questions that really keep me up at night, and I'm really happy to ask other people about them. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to hear from all of our guests and their thoughts on when it's acceptable, if ever, to break the law.
My name is Em. I am from Chicago, Illinois.
When is it acceptable, if ever, to break the law?
Oh, an ethics question. I would say, uh, okay. Typically, I go back to uh, Fantastic Mr. Fox when I have a question like this posed in my life. And when the animals were going and stealing all the cider or the food or whatever it was, and they needed to survive, you kind of look at that situation and you go, okay, what do you do if you're someone who is, there's an apocalypse and you have no resources and your child is dying, starving to death or something. Like at that point, you have to look at your situation and not the law of the land. I can't think of too many other scenarios in which day to day life you would need to break the law. But if there's a situation where it is, a question of life or death, and there's no other way, I can understand why someone would.
My name is Zach. I am from Aurora, Illinois, but I live in Fort Worth, Texas. I guess that's a good question. When is it acceptable to break the law? I think that kind of just depends on what law you want to break. I've been told only ever break one law at a time. So if you've been drinking and you want to drive, don't speed. If you haven't been drinking and you want to drive and you want to speed, go for it. I think it all depends on the context of what you will be breaking. I think the most broken law is probably speeding, something along those lines. But I don't know. The smaller it is, the more okay it is, I guess, is my opinion. I mean, I guess you'd have to understand the laws that you're breaking, I guess. To know when, like, oh yeah, if I speed, if I do 100 in a 55 versus shooting a guy, you've got to understand that one of those carries more weight than the other. One's a civil fine, the other one you're going away, you're going to go to jail for a long time. So I think it kind of just depends. And I mean, you should know right or wrong, you should know better. So I think it comes with education and knowledge on laws in your area.
My name is Sean. I am a showman and entertainment business owner, and I am from Chicago. When is it acceptable to break the law? I guess like when you gotta get somewhere, you just gotta get there. So I don't know, like it's like I don't know how to answer that question because it's like, I'm not a big like klepto, so I don't really love to like steal shit. So I mean, I don't believe in murder, or anything that's like capital punishment. So like, I don't know. I guess like we'll definitely see when shit really hits the fan. I guess that's like the only thing I could say is like when things go really crazy and we enter martial law and a rebellion begins, that's when you could re-ask me that question and I'll probably have a better answer.
So before we get off this subject, though, you did mention when you have to be somewhere. And you mentioned, like, I'm guessing speeding?
Yes.
Like speeding in a car. Where would you have to go in order for you to consciously acceptably break the law?
Usually it has to do with business. So if I'm like running late to a meeting or running late to an event, I got to get there because usually when life is normal, my days are pretty jam packed and usually are not in the same, like they're not location friendly in a sense where like they're not close by each other. So like I'll have to go like somewhere in the suburbs and then head to the city and then back to another side of the suburbs. So and we only have so much time to get certain things done. And then you probably can understand how every once in a while, like, you're caught up in the moment, and things run a little bit later than you anticipated, and then you have to get to that next thing. For example, like, we could have a great conversation, but then you have another appointment after this, right? So you're rushing to get through whatever you need to get through just so you can try and make it to your next appointment in a timely fashion. So, I mean, I guess when it comes to business, that's for me, that's when it makes it acceptable, but it's never right to speed.
I am Chris. I'm a director of photography, and I am from Chicago. I think it's definitely acceptable to break the law. When we say that statement within itself, we assume like murdering someone, robbing someone, dealing in drugs. But I think we don't realize that we break the law every single day when we take a phone call while driving, or we go a little bit over the speed limit. So I feel like I break the law on a complete regular basis. I truly believe that there will come a time, maybe in today's current situation, where people will have to survive. And so we'll realize that the laws that were maintaining civilization in place might no longer apply when we're in life or death situations. So I think there'll be many people breaking the law, including me.
What do you think you would break the law for?
I think when it came down to it, if I needed to steal for food, or if I didn't pay rent, or any other bill that I have, this is technically things that we would consider breaking the law.
Mm-hmm.
Would I rob a person on the street? Probably no. But would I care less about going into like a Julasco or a Mariano's and taking something because I've run out of money and I really need to survive, or I need to feed my children? Absolutely.
When is it acceptable, if ever, to break the law?
I believe it is acceptable to break the law whenever the law does not make sense, causes harm to somebody else through action or inaction, and if I want to. Chaotic neutral. All right? I'll do what I want. No, more chaotic good. But yeah.
So how would you describe that? I think that's a really interesting way to categorize it. Chaotic good. In a scenario where you needed food to live, how would you survive?
I would steal if I had to. But I would only steal, I mean, I wouldn't steal from you don't steal from those who don't have nothing. You steal from, if there's a kid with a crust of bread, and then there's a wealthy merchant with 20 loaves of bread that he's selling for a ridiculous price, I'm going to steal from that merchant and not feel bad about it. And maybe give some to the kid. Depends on if the kid talks or not. I don't like kids.
If he talks or not?
Yeah. You know how kids, like, they want to talk and, like, get all, I don't know. I don't like them. They irritate me.
Fair enough.
I only like my kids, but when I say my kids, I mean kids that, like, I know.
Mm-hmm.
It's random people's kids. It's just like they're just walking petri dishes. They just look like, they're just snot bubbles and sticky hands, and I don't want it.
My name is Brandon. I am a software developer. I am from Elgin, Illinois. That's a hard one. I think it's acceptable to break the law if you have a moral disagreement with the law. Now, the law is complicated. It's built up not only, we start with the Constitution, then we build up over precedent, then we have state, local, and what you end up getting is this hodgepodge of hundreds of years of things that end up in conflict with each other. So living your day-to-day life, you're going to be violating a law somewhere. Now, whether or not the local law enforcement is going to get you for it is irrelevant. If we're talking breaking the law is breaking the law. And if the law exists and you're in violation of it, you're breaking the law. So if your moral code differs from the law and you're not hurting anybody or taking their stuff, I think it's okay to break the law. Within reason, of course. A good example of how the laws get really, really crazy. Elgin, a few years ago, I found out that Elgin had a ordinance on the books that said it was illegal to be out past dark if you're ugly. And that one kind of surprised me. As of a few years ago, that was still on the books. It probably is today. So it's illegal to be out after dark if you're ugly. Well, first off, define ugly. That's a moving target. So if the police wanted to try to enforce that, I don't think it would hold up. Well, I know it wouldn't hold up in court, but you could be, if deemed by the officer from a subjective sense, he looks at you and thinks you're ugly, or me, or whomever, and then cites you or arrests you or what have you. You just broke the law. That's silliness. Now, the law originates from when the Elgin Mental Health Center went in. Ugly was a derogatory term for mentally off, having a mental disease of some form. So it was basically illegal for people with mental handicaps to be out after dark. But that wasn't worded like that. It was, the law was written like 100 years ago or something. And at the time, using these non-PC derogatory terms were more acceptable. So when you look at the law, you see that there's a lot of things in there that have come up over time that we don't agree with, but they still exist. Now, police don't enforce them because it's absurd, but they exist. So it's very easy to fall outside of the bounds of the law. So I think, again, I'm rambling, but I think, again, as long as you're not hurting anybody and you're not taking anybody's stuff, I think you need to allow your own morality to decide if following the law is correct or not.
My name is Stella, and I'm from Chicago. If ever, yeah, I think it's important to break the law if you're using common sense. Like, if something depends on what the law is, right? Like, if you're living in a country that doesn't allow, okay, if I was living somewhere and they said a woman couldn't drive, totally breaking that law. Sorry. Or speaking your mind, I think that's totally okay. Things like that. I think that there's a time and place. But,
can you give me an example?
Yeah, like women driving, or are you talking about in this country or just like in the world?
Yes, anywhere, but it's how you take the question. But essentially, I want to hear an example of maybe freedom of speech, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I think when people, I can't think of one here. God, I'm like the worst interviewee ever. I'm like, why am I not on point? I feel like in certain countries when they say women can't own businesses or women can't drive cars or women can't do whatever, it's like totally against that. Breaking the law. That would be my example, I think. Otherwise, for the most part,
okay.
I don't know what a good law would be to break. I'd have to look that up. But I would say worldwide, that's my thing, is like anything that stops humanity from evolving and growing. I think that, you've got to start somewhere. And if you don't stand up for what you believe in and you just keep going with the status quo, I think that there's, somebody's got to start. Break that law.
My name is Sarah. I'm a visual storyteller and culinary maven, and I'm from a podunk town in Iowa. I think it's acceptable if the ends will justify the means. So, for instance, if someone's life is in danger, or if your rights are being either violated or being threatened, Yeah, I think whenever there is a threat to either life or yeah, I would say health, life, or I keep wanting to say integrity. It's not integrity, but I think also when your allegiance or obedience is to someone or something higher than the authorities, but only if your loyalty is being suppressed, or you're being told you can't do something that they don't have the authority to really dictate.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm from Elgin, Illinois, and I am a self-described geek, lover of life, and hopefully a good person to listen to. I think it's acceptable to break the law if, number one, if the law, if by breaking it, it really doesn't hurt anybody else but yourself, and if it's absurd. There are some things that are absurd and, are there to protect people, but sometimes you just have to do that. Now, I'm not advocating hurting someone else, doing something else, doing whatever, but, like, for example, you're driving down a street when nobody's there at 4 a.m. and it says 30 and you go 40. You're technically breaking the law, but is that hurting anybody? No, but there might be a consequence for doing it, and so you just got to roll the dice on that. So.
My name is Mark Allen Fishman. I'm an artist and comedian. I am from Homewood, Illinois. When is it acceptable, if ever, to break the law? I think the parable, right, to steal a loaf of bread for your starving family, I think there is something to be said about that. I would say, having been a big fan of shows like Breaking Bad, and I'm actually going through The Sopranos for the first time right now, Better Call Saul, I think all of those shows, fictitious as they may be, do showcase that the law has to be a gray area, and almost any crime might have some level of morality in which it is okay in some form or fashion to have completed a crime. That, and it's never a crime so long as the person's insured.
No crime.
I'm just being funny about that, but yes,
Where does that lead up to? Because there has to be, actually, there doesn't have to be, but is there a bar where you can step over? Is there a line that crosses the line?
Yeah, there's plenty of lines that you can cross over. I mean, I think, that's why we have a court of law. That's why, hopefully, we continue to have courts of law and open debate and a chosen set of laws we are supposed to follow, that we actively argue and engage with and push to the line, and we should always have that bar set. That's not to say that every judge or every lawyer is getting it right, but it's an imperfect system by imperfect people. So it's hard to say, is there a bar? I mean, very basics. You shouldn't murder people. And, you shouldn't outright steal from people that do not belong stealing. You should not harm people. You should not hate people. But it's going to happen. It's not right all the time. And in some cases, there might be justification. And I think it's too hard for me to place a single pin anywhere on that line without saying, yeah, but I need to know the whole story.
Hello, my name's Dan. I'm a cartoonist, mixed media artist from Cambridge, UK.
When is it acceptable, if ever, to break the law?
If the law's unjust, then it's acceptable to break. For instance, a lot of people in your country, a lot of states in your country are legalising cannabis. Meanwhile, in my country, you're only allowed to grow it and sell it if you're rich and part of the government. It seems everybody else isn't allowed to touch it. So then
My name is Potato Johnson. I am an IT business analyst, and I am from Crystal Lake, Illinois. Oh, I think there are some stupid laws out there. I think for the most part, if it's not hurting anybody else, I think it's perfectly. I'm kind of a libertarian. It's like, as long as you're an arm's length away from everybody else and it doesn't hurt anybody, go for it.
Can you give me an example of that?
Well, up until I think like most illegal drugs, as long as you're not hurting other people, they should be legalized. I'm kind of a big fan of natural selection. And I think a lot of times laws meant to stop people from hurting themselves are just weighing down the gene pool.
My name is Marie. I am a eyewear specialist, and I am from St. Paul, Minnesota. I think this is me going to this is me digging into my D&D brain where I'm like, there's the lawful good, and then there's the neutral good and chaotic good. I think there's definitely exceptions to that rule where there are petty crimes and different little things, even misdemeanors, that you could probably commit in order to make sure something positive happens. A good example of that's kind of trivial, maybe not even that trivial, is if your wife's having a baby and you just have to get to the emergency room. So I mean, people have been pulled over for speeding because their wife's pregnant and they're trying to get there as fast as possible. That'd be an example. I think there's probably other larger examples, but I can't really think of those at this point. I do think that there's exceptions to that rule. It's kind of just if you're in the moment, kind of think about what is the best thing to do in that situation, especially if it means saving a life.
My name is Michael, and I'm a photographer, videographer in the Naperville area. Okay, all right, this is a two-part answer. It is not acceptable to break the law. It is also not acceptable for you to twist the law into things that you think they are. And my prime example is tax evasion. I know a lot of people who have brung to my attention owning a business that if I go set up a LLC in Rhode Island and then set up an LLC in where I'm from, that I could funnel the money from there to Rhode Island because Rhode Island doesn't pay any tax on anything that's not a physical entity. And what my particular business does not have technically physical assets. They're more of in the cloud digital assets. And though I feel like obviously everybody does that, corporates, bigger companies, Taco Bell, all that stuff. And I could give you some examples on how they funnel lots of money through those particular corporate veils, that as a person to person, that you really should just follow the law as intended and try not to bullshit us at the end.
My name is Brett, and I'm a writer and a musician, and I'm from Chicago, Illinois.
So there was one point in my life that I was talking to an older gentleman who was dealing with an issue of sexual assault. And he was talking about his daughter and that he would kill the guy who did it. And I was like, listen, this isn't, you need to calm down. you let the authorities handle this. You do, whatever, you do it. And he was like, no, he said he's like, the authorities can handle it. That's what they're there for, and they will get their own justice. But there are two forms of justice. There's actual justice and then court of law justice. And so I think there are definitely situations like that where court of law justice doesn't actually meet regular justice. And I think those situations where it is okay to break the law. And on the smaller scale, if you're at the self-checkout, like occasionally you might, you just might accidentally shove in a chapstick. I don't know. But I think speeding, to me, there are laws that are passed like that are about revenue generation and aren't about anything real. I know with speed limits, for instance, I speed all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. The speed limits are set artificially low so that they can make money off of it. It's not a safety thing. There have been a million studies that have proved that speed doesn't matter, but they go to mothers and they say, oh, this is for the children. Aren't these speeds scary? Speeds are terrifying, blah, blah, blah. And they scare them and they keep the speed limits low so they can make money off of all of us. So I think when laws are scams, it's fine. You take your chance, but I don't have a problem morally with it. I think there's a lot of gray area in a lot of things.
This is Albert. I am an operations manager from Savannah, Georgia.
I think breaking the law just depends on if it's stealing or things like that. It depends on your economic status, I think. If you're really trying to like feed your family or something like that, I don't think it's good to steal someone's car, steal someone's property just for the hell of it. But if you're like down to your last, prayer, really, you need to feed your family or feed yourself, an apple or something like that is not a big deal. Killing somebody, I think, is if the person is trying to kill you, or if you know they're going to kill somebody. That's probably the only way I would look at it.
We are Lauren and Ryan. We are wedding photographers, and we are from Chicago, Illinois.
It's acceptable to break the law to get a great picture. That's definitely my motto. I don't really break the law that often, but when it comes to my photography and I want to get in a certain area, I definitely kind of push the limits. It's always easier to ask for forgiveness after than ask for permission sometimes. But obviously nothing super dangerous. People's lives matter first, but I do kind of push the limits when it comes to my photography.
When is it acceptable to break the law? It's acceptable to break the law if the laws in place are unconscionable, meaning that the laws are something that is so, just offensive that, to any normal person, that would really be the only time I would condone necessarily breaking a law. I mean, what Lauren said about, shooting and kind of pushing, into private property and stuff. We disagree about that a little bit, probably because I tend to get caught whenever I do something wrong, whereas she has been the fortunate one and never had that happen. So anyway, I would say it's okay. Civil disobedience is okay. Like if we had a law that all of a sudden allowed slavery again, right? Well, we're going to disobey that law, and we're going to fight against that law actively. If the government does something that's tyrannical and the people on the whole view that move as tyrannical, I think it's perfectly okay to break that law.
My name is John. I'm an artist and a locksmith. I am from the west suburbs of Chicago. I don't know, I guess when you can get away with it. No, I mean, it depends. I think it really is the thing. Is it a just law or an unjust law? Like, I mean, if you want to get dramatic and go into situations that, like, I've never been into, it's like, oh, do you steal the bread to feed your family? Like, yeah, I think you go ahead and do that. But I think that all of us have like this thing where it's like, it's against the law to speed, but you're still gonna fucking speed. Like, what the hell does it matter? And I'm a grown up now. I'm 37, but I've done questionable things over the years. I definitely shoplifted when I was a kid. But I don't look back at that now and be like, oh, what a criminal, law-breaking bastard I was. I just, see it as like, I was a kid. What are you gonna do? But in general, you should probably follow most of the laws that pertain to like not hurting other people, and besides that, it's all kind of just suggestions.
My name is Rob. I am a content creator and content marketer, and I am from the Midwest in America. I think it really depends on the law and how just it is for the person. I think it's justifiable if it's a ridiculous law, or if it's a law that you're going like, this is not something that needs a law. There's a lot of crap laws out there. Now, if it's a big thing, don't do it. Not acceptable to shoot somebody. Not acceptable to hit somebody with your car. If it's something like we've got a traffic light cam up so you don't turn on red, even though it's an intersection that there's no traffic at ever, I think that's bull. They're just trying to collect money. If in that case, you should be able to turn on red. That's a law, but I think that's perfectly legit. I think that's dumb. So if it's a dumb law and you really can critically think about it as a dumb law and justify that it's dumb, then sure. Now, if you're a psychopath and you can justify killing somebody, that's another story. Then we're talking a whole other can of worms.
So where does that line drawn?
I think that it comes down to personal ethics and morals. I think it's the reason we have courts and we have judges. There has to be discussion about where that line is. Do I have a quick answer? No. Am I a lawyer? No. Do I have my views on it? Sure. I mean, I think it's ridiculous that people were put in jail for longer for having a little, like an ounce of marijuana, as opposed to somebody that had somebody shot. Okay? There are people in jail longer because of possession for an ounce than people that paid to have somebody do a hit on somebody. I think that's ridiculous. Where's the line? I think it's something that has to constantly be negotiated and talked out. Mm-hmm. And I think that it comes down to your personal ethics and your personal morals. It depends on your ethical standpoint too. Needs of the many versus needs of the few. I am the only one, that kind of thing. You have to take all of that into consideration when you start talking about legality and what is acceptable, where the line really is.
Now, I did say I would give my own answer to this, and in simplest terms, I believe my answer for when it's acceptable to break a law is when you are not causing someone else a disservice, whether it be hurting them physically, emotionally, financially, or causing them any kind of upheaval of their day. I think one of the only ways that I can refute this is by thinking that there is an emergency on someone else's behalf. For instance, if you're at a stop sign and someone blows through the stop sign, doesn't even look, my first thought always goes to, what an asshole. However, my second thought, and this has been self-trained over the years, is that maybe there is something going horribly wrong in his day. Maybe he is rushing his wife to the hospital to give birth. Maybe that person driving through the stop sign is rushing to the hospital because they're about to die. Or they just got a phone call from their mother who collapsed on the floor and he needs to rush them to the hospital. We don't live in everyone else's shoes, so sometimes it's best not to judge in those situations. However, it is human nature to first have that emotional feeling of, boy, what an asshole. However, in these kind of situations, I would understand if I was living through an emergency, like I was trying to get my wife to the emergency room because something horrible had happened. Running a red light, I will take the ticket. I will go talk to the police and I will pay the fine because what's more important to me is the health and well-being of my loved ones. So with that in mind, I'd say as long as you are not causing a disservice to someone else. Food, if you are taking food away from someone who needs it, taking someone's money, if you are breaking into someone's property and causing damage, this is taking away from someone. This is where I say the laws exist for a reason, to keep everyone safe and healthy and potentially, hopefully, happy. Stories like these make me feel a little more connected to the world. Even if I disagree with someone's thoughts on if it's right to break a law or not, it still makes me feel a little more connected. And even though I might feel like I'm alone in my thoughts sometimes, I know that I'm not. Stories bring the world a little closer, and we're all in this big story called life together. Do you have your own opinions about when it's acceptable to break the law? Email us or send us a voice clip to behindeverystory@gmail.com. We would love to play it on the next episode. Thank you so much for joining us here on Behind Every Story. If you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast streaming app or sharing your podcast or sharing this podcast with your friends and family. And of course, just random people. The next time you're at the grocery store, let them know about this awesome little podcast you found. And be sure to like us and follow us on Facebook at Behind Every Story Podcast to stay up to date on all our new episodes. And of course, you can always find us on behindeverystory.com. Great storytellers make the world a smaller and more intimate place. Thank you to all the storytellers out there, big and small. And thank you to this week's guests, Al, Brett, Bob, Brandon, Chris, Daniel, John, Lauren and Ryan, M, Mark, Marie, Michael, Potato Johnson, Rob, Sarah, Stella, Sean, and Zach. I'm your storyteller, Jason Osterkamp, and it's been a pleasure sitting around the campfire with you. Join us again next time when we discuss everyone's fears and concerns about everything going on in the world right now with COVID-19. Join us again next time on Behind Every Story.